Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the Remaking the Real Festival at the Where Are We Now panel. And I'm so excited to be talking with so many talented, wonderful, thoughtful, innovative artists as we think about what kind of future we're facing and how our art may respond to that or may not respond to that. So my name is Enongo Lumumba-Kasongo, and I am a producer and rapper who goes by the name Samus, and I'm also a postdoctoral fellow at Brown University in the music department as of last year. And as far as my kind of musical practice goes, I tend to focus on the intersection of Black feminist ideas with geek and gaming culture. I'm pretty much obsessed with video games, and they find their way into all of my songs as far as talking about social theory or just the hobbies that I have. So I'm really invested in Black woman geekhood and how we articulate ourselves as nerds and geeks in this environment. And in addition to that, my doctoral research has focused on the politics of community-based recording studios. I'm very much invested in questions around access, who's able to access recording technology, and what we can do to create spaces that facilitate different kinds of learning as it relates to studio environments. And my very last thing, which kind of ties into the first, is that I'm part of a game studio called Glow Up Games, and we're working on a kind of rap composition, free-to-play game that I'm really excited about, and it'll focus primarily on Black women. So I'm really excited about that because gaming universes really could benefit from more games that speak to and with Black women and their experiences. So I'm really excited to introduce our guests who will talk about their practices as well, starting with Joey DeFrancesco. So please feel free to talk about your practice.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Enongo. Yeah, my name is Joey Neve DeFrancesco. I'm a musician, historian, and organizer based here in Rhode Island for a very long time. The music that I've been doing the longest and is probably best known is a band that I co-founded and play guitar in still called Downtown Boys. I co-founded with another amazing musician and organizer, Victoria Ruiz, here in Rhode Island. That band has gone all over the place, put out a few records. More recently, I've started a new project that I've been very focused on called Neve. That's a lot of the same political concerns as Downtown Boys, right, in that band. And this band is a lot about social and economic justice as the primary sort of like lyrical focus and mission of the group. But with La Neve, it's more sort of electronic dance music, and then also combines these aspects of like drag performance, which is something I used to do when I was younger in a more conventional sense of like performing lip syncing. But this is taking some of the aesthetics and like practice of drag, but putting it through this kind of like punk and electronic lens. And this is what the project that I did something for this festival, for the Remaking the Real Festival, which I'll talk about more in a second. In addition to the music, I've also been an organizer for a long time, mostly a labor organizer. First work in this was really with the Hotel Workers Union. Me and the other founder, Downtown Boys Victoria, were both hotel workers. And so from the beginning, our music and politics in there were fused. During this COVID era that we've been in, is also part of founding a new like musician worker union called the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, which started as a way of musicians responding to kind of demanding things in the era of COVID as all of our work fell away, but has now transformed into other campaigns around, setting better standards for music workers and labels, venues, with streaming services and with tech companies. So very directly here, right? My music as a music worker, both in terms of what I'm creating and identifying as a worker, has been very closely identified with these political concerns. That's what I tried to do with my performance for Remaking the Real. For this, I set up an interactive live stream, right? So after COVID hit, all of our performing then moved into live streaming world, which is terrible for so many reasons, right? It became very hard to interact with people. Economically, right, all of these live streams, we were getting paid nothing for them while these tech companies made all this money off of advertising revenue. from these live stream performances. So this performance was trying to both create something fun, but, you know, critique a little bit this live stream and economy and culture, where we set up something where participants in a Zoom call like this could actually control aspects of the performance, from lighting and music down to how much the performer was getting paid or not paid during the performance. So you can link to that somewhere else on this site where you're watching this. But yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Joey. You're doing so many things. It's incredible. Our next panelist is Shey Rivera Ríos, and I'll leave it up to them.
Thanks, Enongo. It's so good to be with everyone here on this panel. So I'm Shey Rivera Ríos, Boricua, born and raised, Providence-based. Been living here for 10 years with deep roots in my community here in Providence. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, so any kind, I think, like, you know, all of us are multidisciplinary, really. This thing about just being in one medium seems so strange to me. It's like we jump and do all these things with whatever medium. So I feel like that whatever I can put my hands on, I will use. I'm also a geek and lover of Samus and love video games, and that extends to my creative practice. So I really love immersive stories and stories that can somehow involve the audience as a participant in it. So I do a lot of performance art and digital animation as well. So in the sense of the word, my digital art, performance, and participatory actions are processes where I weave magical realism and science fiction, but also to explore colonialism as a person that comes from a lived experience of the US colony, the oldest, biggest US colony that is still facing all these atrocities, and how now, as a displaced diaspora, how does my work relate to my community there in Puerto Rico and also here in Providence? So I really like exploring what self-determination means, like what governance means, what power do we have as residents of a place and a land. And yeah, so thinking a lot about that, especially with this project called Fantasy Island that really explores the role of real estate and tourism on oppressing our communities and taking land away from us and taking rights away from us and prioritizing corporations. So playing a lot with memes and collages and animations to bring in light and have people feel compelled to walk through the, you know, go through the rabbit hole and like learn about these things in a way that feels like, I don't know, enticing, because it's a lot of things that we need to unpack, especially right now. So that's me. Yeah, making magic all the time.
Wonderful. We love magicians over here. Thank you. So our last panelist, certainly not least, is the wonderful Nafis White. So please take it away.
Hello, thank you so much, Enongo. What a pleasure to be in everyone's presence. You know, what a pleasure to be part of Remaking the Real Festival, and to be here to present a little something for you all. So I love what Shey was saying about, you know, all of us being interdisciplinary. I think that is very true. You know, I tend to ease a little more towards sculpture, but definitely in my wheelhouse is printmaking, part of which, you know, I'll talk about with this. You know, also video performance, started my artistic career as a dancer. So movement always kind of, you know, has an anchor there. So whenever I come into a room, I just like to name some of who I am, you know, when I come in. Mixed race woman, you know, I come from an Italian, Scottish, African-American family. I'm an adoptee. You know, part of the LGBTQIA umbrella, proudly. Dropped out of college, you know what I'm saying? Like, spent a lot of years trying to figure out how to kind of move and groove. I felt very much like Maya Angelou, trying to, you know, savor these different parts and learn and be open. And I think a lot of that openness helped me become the artist I am. And also my parents, both my adoptive and birth, and foster. Because I think without them, I wouldn't, you know, have understood at such a young age what it means to stand in yourself. to have a degree of self-love, to have familial support, and to be an activist in that, even as, knee-high to a beanpole, telling people you're not going to talk to me like that, or, put me in these particular boxes. But my work practice at the moment, there are two different facets in some ways. There's the activist work, which takes a lot out of me. When I'm talking about death, dying, being Black as a revolutionary act, standing presently in space, thinking about the words of our good ancestor, Toni Morrison, talking about this is the time when artists come alive. So a lot of the work that I do really does, talk about, issues of police brutality, citizens being murdered, all rhyme and reason of inequalities, environmental, social, and, those can manifest in a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're outdoor sculptures, sometimes it's neon work, sometimes it's printmaking, like you'll see, in this festival. There's an exhibition called State of Urgency, and that is all prints from a collective that I'm a part of very proudly, called the Print Like You Give a Damn Press Collective, out of AS 220 is where we've been operating from. The other work that I do is very steeped in identity work, has a lot to do with coming of age, having all these different facets of family, different members who like you, don't like you, how you get a chance to learn more about yourself. And so a lot of the work that I do then works with hair, works with embodied knowledge, imbuing love and power, the ancestral, into these very specific kind of sculptural works that require a knowledge around African-American hairstyling, and also Victorian era, all which pull from different parts of my identity. So, that's some of the who that I am, and I'm proud to be here with you all and excited for a conversation.
Yes. Wow. I wish we could be in the same space. I just want to hug everybody. It's like a crushing me. Everyone has such good energy through the Zoom screen, and I appreciate it after a very long day. So I wanted to start by just checking in and seeing how you're doing. I think it's a loaded question for sure, but it's an important one. And I think I'd like to kind of set the tone by acknowledging you as full, whole people, not just artists, who are parts of communities, who have needs and wants, who are trying to navigate this life and situation on a day-to-day basis. So feel free to give as much or as little, but I'd love to hear how you're doing.
I'm over here breathing, so I'm like, maybe I just need to get what you talk about. How are you doing? There's so many different aspects of that, right? So I think about the personal, I think about the transition of a very important relationship to me, one in which I was married for 17 years that has recently transitioned, and what is it like to be alone during COVID? What is it like to find yourself? What is it like to anchor yourself in your art? What is it like for things to be in the beginning again, things to be fresh? How do you stay open? All of those things. I think about my mother, who was recently diagnosed with cancer, and the kind of process in which to be there for her and also anchor in for myself, and thinking about what healing is, what self-care is, what presence, and what is it to extract joy, and live to your fullest. So I think of those things. So how am I doing is emotional. How am I doing is feeling that. But how I'm doing also is rejoicing in the fact that I have my hands, and I have my mind, and I have my index, and that I'm creating work in so many different ways without worrying about how it will be valued or received. I'm giving myself freedom to just dream right now. And in fact, with work process, I'm talking a lot, people talk about the work as being intense. And I like to talk about that, but I also like to talk about play, and what is that, shift, that transitional shift from things being so about production and value to things being about expansion vulnerability, openness. So, you know, how am I doing is that. How am I doing is seeing the world each day with grateful eyes, with open eyes, taking risks, leaning into fear, you know, being there for, you know, people in ways I hadn't imagined. Yeah, taking risks.
Powerful.
So,
Thank you. Thank
mhm.
you for sharing that of yourself. Thank you. And anyone else, feel free to jump in and let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, wow. I have so much appreciation, Nafis, for what you shared and that piece leaning into fear. I feel like that I resonate with that deeply. I feel like there's some throughout this time being in a process of not so much sharing in vulnerability with the external world, but allowing the vulnerability with myself to accept myself in that and hold it and peeling all the layers slowly as I take all this information and everything is shifting. So that's been a different approach to how I've maybe been in the world in the past few years, where it was very external, very giving out energy to people a lot, being an Aries and like just go, 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 and having that, what Nafis called out, that, you know, sometimes toxic relationship to productivity, but it also comes from a place where we're wired to think that we're not enough. So really dismantling that, like, that's where I've been, and holding, you know, as a queer person too, respecting the fact that I build family in ways that are different and new and unique and important, and the simple things can be really powerful. So holding that, and yeah, I feel when Nafis shared too, the how are you doing definitely does, as it's always felt recently like that, like what part feels what, you know? So yeah, like feeling like, you know, how do you step up to the moment right now? And how do you just rest and, you know, for yourself? So healing a lot from things that just needed to change within myself, and then holding relationships with my close ones really dearly, especially at a time where you don't get to have that luxury anymore, to be in company, to have a hug, to like share a meal. So yeah, I think reflective and like a little bit analytical and more appreciative of naps. That's where I'm at. It's like things are so hard. I like naps. Got a
Um,
nap.
wow, that's profound. It's hard doing work when I've been saying this. It's hard doing work when my bed is like just over there. I had to like turn my desk so I couldn't be looking directly at my bed while I was working, because it was like, it's too tempting. It's too tempting. So thank you for that. I'm hearing a thread of gratitude and a noticing in your worlds. And Joey, feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing all that. Those are really all important in moving things to hear and to share. And I think it's important to be sharing those things right now and to be able to appreciate people in your immediate vicinity and yeah, our neighbors and coworkers, like we all are here. There's all sorts of obvious things that can be said about how like traumatic and wild the moment in the last 6 months have been, that I'm sure we're going to get into more. And that's made it very hard, of course, to survive economically, to deal with, yeah, like family members being ill or being being able to be in contact with those people. And every day having these new crises that you have to somehow like keep surviving through. But also want to emphasize, I think what everyone else has been saying, the importance of like, yeah, appreciating the moment, appreciating the things we do have, acknowledging that a whole lot of people in this country, for the entire history of this country and throughout the world, have survived and continue to produce things and like be creative through crises and through trauma, and like understand the importance of seeing those historical fights and connecting our present moment to those times and in our present moment. I guess just specifically for me, of course, this moment has brought out all these, you know, exacerbated all these existing mental health problems and these things. And having to constantly recenter yourself into the moment is important. And then this weekend, actually, as part of this project, recording a performance, even though it was only with a couple people and then interacting with some people online. It was a much more like close performance and intentional performance, and feeling that kind of closeness even for like a couple hours while doing that just like really made me feel like hopeful and like capable of moving forward in a way that I hadn't felt in a while. So yeah, just like engaging with artistic practice in this like community is so important. Just even this week had a very clear example of that for me.
Thank you all so much. And wow, what a powerful way to begin the conversation with ruminations on gratitude and, you know, where we are in the face of all of this. I'm just so appreciative of hearing how you've wrestled with that. So I want to, before we kind of talk about where you are now artistically, I would like to talk about how you sort of came into your identity as an artist. So the real, right? That's like the kind of thing that's activating this conversation. So I often hear folks say, oh, I'm not a real musician, or oh, I'm not a real photographer. I'm not a real, you know, like we have these negotiations with ourselves. So I was curious if you could share a little bit about when you maybe had a revelation, or when you were able to come into your identity or accept, or maybe you're still rejecting particular labels about your artistry, but how you've been able to think about what it means to be a real artist within your respective fields.
Oh, I love that question. Can I start? Is that okay?
Please.
Yeah, I always had been a creative, weird kid living in the rural mountains of Puerto Rico, but I never thought like, my family's not an art, like there's nobody artsy, there's not an artist. So really I came to like think of myself as an artist as an adult. Like, and I've been a drummer. I was in punk and hardcore bands in Puerto Rico, and I've been a drummer for like 20 years, but I never thought like I'm an artist. And actually when I moved to Providence, that was when I like really felt comfortable taking that in and being like, yeah, I'm an artist. That's the thing, because I thought it was inaccessible and only people who went to art school were artists. So my time at AS 220 was really critical in that. So I was in the organization for about 8 years, and that's a arts and culture nonprofit institution in Providence where Nafis also is working and many of us interact with. And that was really great because, you know, this, at least the sense of like democratizing access to creativity, and that everyone has creativity, we just choose different mediums to be in creative in. And then seeing that from that lens of like, oh, of course, you know, my dad is a very creative person. He creates with whatever. He's a builder and like a handyman, and also draws. And like, I don't know, just seeing all these things in different people and finding more comfort in actually what Nafis said, like being bold and taking risk. Because I feel like creating artwork is taking a risk, is like facing yourself, really seeing what you're feeling, holding on to a feeling or something that you see, and then putting value on it. And that's something that really changed my perspective, because it's like I had to decide to stop not valuing what I create and put value into what I create. And that was the mind shift for me. Like, if I'm gonna make a doodle, if I'm going to make a song, whatever it is, if it has value to me, then I can treat it in a way where I feel we can share it and like other people can like pitch in or whatever. So that was a mindset. And it took me a while, but yeah, I'm a proud artist, creative person now. Thanks for that question.
Of course, I love that. Just thinking about figuring out the value for yourself and with your community. I think it can be really challenging what value we associate with being an artist. I mean, obviously, we're in a capitalist society, right? So it can be really hard. And a lot of folks often talk about their epiphany about their identity as an artist having to do with, oh, I was paid for something, or, you know, I was hired to do this thing. And so I appreciated that you were thinking about it in terms of the intrinsic value for you as someone who loves to work on a particular craft, that there can be other relationships we have with our art, even if it's really, really hard in this society to deconstruct those relationships. So any other thoughts on that, please feel free.
Yeah, with COVID as musicians, I think it's really put defining ourselves as musicians or artists as like our primary like identity as workers into a lot of confusion, because for a lot of us, like it took so long to get to the point where like making music and like touring, and it was like so much work, but it was finally like kind of economically sustainable like last year for me. It still had like all these other like side gigs and hustles all the time, but it was like, okay, this is kind of like my like thing I do. And obviously it had meaning beyond that, and I continued to do it regardless. But then it's like all that went away, and it was kind of like, oh shit, like am I this thing? What does it mean? You know, I have to picking up all these other jobs and gigs, so I'm not even having a lot of time to do this anymore. You know, even if we put value on our art, if we don't like economically have time to do it because we have to do other things to survive, what does that mean? And so it's throwing into all this sort of confusion. And then we were getting the expanded unemployment. And so for a while it was like, okay, I can kind of live off this and make art primarily. And this is, you know, having to deal with all this like trauma right now, but this is still like a thing. But then that ran out, and it's like, okay, now you can't make any money off of this. Have to do all these other things to survive. What does this mean right now? And I mean, it sucks to think that way. Like, I totally agree. To like, we absolutely need to find the like inner meaning of our art and like definitions as artists and musicians. But yeah, it's really, really hard, and the last months have made that struggle even more difficult to do.
So when did we know? When did we know? You know, like, I mean, I've had people tell me that I dance to the beat of a different drummer. And I used to take issue with that, but then I was like, you know what, maybe you're right. You know, like maybe being different, you know, I've never really necessarily fit into different kind of categories and whatnot, and been at the periphery, you know. And then I think also having a father as a college professor, a Yale PhD, mind you, who grew up in the slums in South Bronx, you know, who struggled all his life, you know, to provide for family, and how he was never given tenure. The thing that comes to mind is something that was said often about being authorized but not recognized, you know, and how as a child I would lament, you know, moving every year or every other year, you know, to Maine, to Georgia, to Missouri, to California, you know. But then how, you know, incredible landscape has entered into my practice in the way that I make and the way that I see things. And also how the artistic can happen in any way, and at any time, you know, so giving myself agency, you know, and you know, authorization to play a little bit, you know. So for me, I think of, you know, chefs like Jacques Pipin, who talks about like, you know, creating omelets and like, you know, creating an experience. Or I think about, you know, Ai Weiwei, who talks about, you know, there's no separation between like art and life. And I'm just like, yes, like I feel that deeply, you know what I mean? There's not an off on. So I feel like in some ways it was, you know, brought to my attention through people. I think my aunt, Evelyn Lincoln, who actually is a professor at Brown and has been for many decades, you know, saw in me, my uncle as well, he's a master printmaker, you know, would give me little things to play with, Venetian glass beads, or, you know, and the things that I would construct, you know, like that, or be interested in the gossip, you know, the art historical gossip, which is juicy. It's so good. It's so good. So all of these things, I think, but I've always stood in the fact that I'm an artist. It's how it is, period. You know, and I don't think that I have to oscillate too much between all of the, if I'm dancing, that qualifies. If I'm writing, that qualifies. If I'm cooking, that qualifies. Like, it's just, it's on. So, you know, I just live it.
I love all of these different relationships to your artistry that are, you know, you're triangulating between practical constraints and your sort of embodied experiences, your communities, and trying to figure out what this thing means on a, you know, sometimes daily basis. So I think something that I've been thinking a lot about And we kind of talked a little bit about this in our like secret pre-meeting that we had before this conversation. Has been, and Joe, you sort of talked about it in regards to live streaming, but so how has your practice shifted in this new reality? What is your relationship now to kind of the art that you produce, and beyond that, the audiences that you may have, you know, kind of been in relation with through your art practice? So you can think of that as your community, you can think about that as fans or supporters, but what is your relationship with these folks now? Joey, you've talked about touring, and kind of part of touring is building up relationships with people in different areas, and coming back to see the same folks in the same town 5 years in a row until there's enough people there to have critical mass to where that show finally pays for itself, that kind of thing. So I'm curious if you all can speak about how you're thinking about your relationships to your various audiences, whatever that may be at this time, and perhaps how your art practice has shifted as well.
Yeah, I guess I can just start because yeah, you were mentioning me, but yeah, you're absolutely right with like touring. I mean, that's like how I knew you, Enongo, right? It's like we would go up to Ithaca every year, twice a year, or you'd be in Providence, or you like intersect at a festival in New York City, and it's just like so much of your social life is like people all over the place, and it's such an important part of your practice. Like for me as a songwriter, especially, is like I would write thinking about an audience, and you kind of like play the songs live, and they change and they grow, and you work on them as you're performing them live. And in addition, there's an economic aspect, right? Like you're getting immediate like money from touring to be able to like fund then more songwriting, and it's like even in the best of times kind of like a shitty economic system for the arts, right? It's like it was already kind of like bad even before COVID, right? But it's made it worse. But yeah, now it's, you know, I think there's a few things. One, just like when everything struck and everything changes, like the struggle to like keep creating at all, then the struggle economically to like how can you like finance keeping on doing this. But then yeah, there's the isolation as well, that you don't get to perform this stuff in a community, you don't get to be with your band members anymore. You can like send files back and forth, but it's a much more solitary process, and we try to recreate these things with like live streaming and other forms of like community creation. Like we started the Musicians Union, I mentioned in the introduction, during this COVID period. And for myself, and talking with a lot of other musicians, they've said this to me, that like, you know, a big part of why they appreciate the Musicians Union is the community building aspect of it, that so many of us haven't seen each other because touring's been cut off. But through this like organizing and other forms of community building, even though they're not in person, we've been able to like consistently see each other, working to build this collective project together. So yeah, there's a few things.
Yeah, it's so difficult losing that community so quickly. And I remember it was 2 months into quarantine, and I had been doing fine, or so I thought. And I just had a total breakdown one night, and I realized I miss getting ready for shows. I miss writing a set list. I miss being annoyed because I'm going to be late because I didn't plan ahead. I missed all of those things. I missed the sticky floors of the dive bar. You know, it really put me in a space of noticing and remembering and really grieving. So I think that's been a very difficult part of the process, and I appreciate you for sharing that. Are there any other thoughts on your kind of shifts in your practice or relationship to your audience or creative space?
Things have shifted. I mean, I can say that, you know, exhibitions for me, I had a very robust exhibition schedule, and all of a sudden it was like, you know, it just like, you know, just flatlined. I was evacuated from an artist residency. So, you know, so that kind of was like, you know, dealing with, right, like I remember being on that train, you know, like coming back from Vermont, and just thinking like, you know, okay, so this is for real, you know what I mean? Like, and how are we going to do this? And also, you know, like I said, scared to be alone, you know, by myself, you know, kind of navigating what does it look like, you know, if I wanted to change studios, how do I do that? You know, how do I earn money now, you know, all of a sudden. So I started doing things like getting dressed up every day to the nines for a walk, period. You know what I'm saying? Gown on or whatever it is, something flowy, something, you know, paint the nails, put the lips on, even though you got a mask, like whatever it is, like just go stunt, like my stunt walks, you know what I'm saying? Just to have some levity and also to shift space. You know, what is it like when you see a woman like, you know, like with a train, you know, like walking down, like it's kind of, I don't know. I think I needed to inject a bit of whimsy. I was very Mary Poppins about my stuff in that moment, you know, like how to get some levity when things were feeling so serious, you know, and but I think also to, you know, in the face, you know, as Cornel West would say, you know, the calamitous, you know, is like, you know, the disastrous, you know, you're in this space, but yet all hope is not lost. Like you were still here. You're still here, you know? So the loss of revenue is a challenge. The loss of resources, you can't get things shipped to you anymore. Provide different problems for you or different solutions. You know, if you are someone like myself, which I enjoy transforming materials into something else, then really what you're left with is your walks and your eyes, you know, and seeing how even the way the weather is, you know, how that can also inspire, you know, how maybe there's detritus everywhere, but maybe it has a different look. It hits different right now in COVID. And I think one important thing was establishing, like basically, you know, a video chat weekly with a group of real tight Black women. And let me tell you, my hand to God, like that has saved all of our lives more than once. So, you know, different ways of moving. And also the hope that things will, you know, come back, you know, at some particular juncture, but not stopping, well, again, that gets into the production, you don't stop growing. I guess that's the thing, right? The production element, the luxury good aspect of these things, the coveted materials and whatnot. But, you know, how do you keep making it interesting for yourself on a very honest level, you know? It's a marathon, you know, not a sprint.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just the importance again of community is it's life-saving at this point. It's completely life-saving. So thank you for both affirming that. Shea, I don't know if you had anything to jump in with this.
Well, that was super rich, but yeah, definitely. Performing a lot, I guess, like similar to both Joey and Nafis. Like, I actually chose to leave my previous job in April, and that's when COVID hit. So that was a whole process of thinking. I had been wanting for a long time to just like, you know, put all the energy into myself rather than an institution. And that was the moment I chose to do that. And I'm freaking out, like being like, what does this mean now? What is like economic sustainability gonna mean? Healthcare, like all these things. And then, you know, just like when things are really difficult, I feel like there is inherently perhaps something that creative people bring or activates in our bodies where we just like, there's no other way, you just have to shift, and you feel more comfortable with shifting perhaps because your life has always shifted, you know? So it's like versus maybe some people who have had more stability in their lives, I can understand how that can be harder. But definitely thriving in the moment in the sense of like recognizing the challenges because things have been real hard, but also like, you know, Nafis and Joey said, like Joey launched the union with all these incredible artists so that, you know, there's advocacy and there's like a way to build new infrastructure. And like similar to me, like really owning my organizer role and helping other circles and finding a new way to contribute to my community and also new ways to hustle and like just trust in myself that I have the ability to bring something important to the table in a moment where we all need things to help us survive. And yeah, like I really think, you know, I don't know what to expect. I think also being comfortable with like, nothing needs to be perfect right now. Nothing should. We all need to rest, being flexible with people. I launched a lot of projects, and what I did was, instead of them being live performance, we shifted them all to virtual space, but only with consent from the artists. And it's like, what do you feel is comfortable and would be helpful to you, rather than, you know, continue to, I don't know, like replicate systems that impose things on people without consent, or that force people to produce in ways that feel uncomfortable. So thinking a lot about that, like a series, Luna Loba, that I have curated for 4 years, about 90 artists have performed in that series, like to this day. And it's like a space of ritual and performance. And, you know, that one, we did have a little bit of funding, but like all the live shows needed to be canceled because of COVID, so we pivoted. So I've just been thinking a lot about that. Like, you know, as artists, we also have always multiple roles in our communities. Organizers, like thinkers, designers, like, yes, we like are lovers and have family and all these things, but we play such multiple roles in our communities. You know, I used to be in a lot of conversations where folks would talk about artists as like foreigners and people who just pop in. But it's like, no, you know, we live in our neighborhoods too. Like, we care for our neighborhoods. So it's like been an important moment for me personally to step up more in the neighborhood, in order to make sure that whatever little resources right now are coming to our community really like can flourish and go where they're supposed to. And people who need it the most, like, can, you know, be on an equal level with everyone else or something. I don't know, because it's like all these things are unearthing, and we need to change all these systems. Like, they've been hurting us for too long, and a lot of us are tired. I feel like this country has repressed so many things for so long, and now it's just blossomed into this like large, complicated flower that we are unraveling. So I'm actually excited about that. I think that there's a lot of anger in me that I choose to funnel into productivity of thinking, how do we, know, Joey, Nafis, Enongo, myself, you know, Brown Arts Initiative, a residence here, what can we do with what we have? And that's kind of where my mind is at. Obviously, I have days where I wake up, I'm grouchy as hell and I hate everything. But, you know, holding the joy, like Nafi said, like, what are the things that you as an artist bring magic to? How do you inhabit space in different ways? Like, you know, it's kind of like part of the calling. So thank you for that. I feel like I can talk forever about that, so I appreciate the space.
Yes. Wow. Y'all are really spitting right now. Like, today was very, as I'm sure for all of you, long, and I did not know how I was going to end up at 5:55 p.m. with y'all. But I'm so energized. I'm so energized by the honesty, the willingness to be vulnerable and talk about how difficult this has been, but also how you're trying to make sense of it. I think part of the problem with the isolation is the wondering, is it just me that's not handling this really well? Are people, you know, especially on social media, you can see folks saying, oh, I just did this thing. I managed to figure this out. I'm doing this, I'm working on that. And, you know, for me, it's like, wow, I just got out of bed today, and that was my big accomplishment. And it can feel really, really challenging to face that. So I deeply appreciate your honesty in this space about all the things that you're vacillating between. And I loved what you said, Shea, about that actually all of you kind of talked about, just having to be so agile as an artist. It's partially a beautiful thing, but it's also really challenging, because we shouldn't have to be scrapping so hard to be able to say something about our lives or about our experiences. But it's so difficult. So many of us were just getting to spaces of financial sustainability after working at this for years and years and years. So it's frustrating for a number of different reasons. But I wanted to, I guess, talk about other folks or ideas or things that are giving you inspiration in the moment, that are enabling you to get out of bed on those days that you get out of bed, and that are pushing you to try to envision a new world. And I want to talk also about what kind of world you envision, you know, on the other side of this, because I believe there will be another side of this. But yeah, so please, for me, this is more of a selfish question. I just want to hear who's inspiring you so I can go and watch and read and listen and just, you know, be totally submerged in folks who are thinking about things in interesting, nice, gentle, generous ways. So please feel free to share names, bands, movies, whatever.
May I begin? Like, who's inspiring? Okay, let's go. All right, so like, who's inspiring is basically, so I'm a house head, like straight up, you know what I'm saying? Straight up. So people who are inspiring me are DJs who are, you know, right now currently quarantined at different places, and this strange cosmos has allowed for friendships to build between me and other performers, DJs, artists, etc. So in terms of my walks, like my sojourns, my gown wearing stunt moments, you know what I mean? Like discussions kind of within myself. Anyway, the soundtracks are Oshunlade or Ian Friday, house music, you know, to the core. And also Doug Gomez, because I just feel like, you know, Afro house, Latin house, classic house, like all of these things create a meter and a tempo. And for me to continue to vibe and vibrate and build in the way that I do means, and also in a meditative state with a lot of the hair work that I do that takes weeks or months to do, you know, I have to get into a particular zone. This keeps me on a level and allows for me to really breathe in the optimism and you know, stand in the hurt also, you know, stand and be present. But music actually right now has never been so important to me in my life. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it has been, yeah, a lifeline. And walking for literal miles. I mean, some of this is, you know, lessons in letting go, you know, and it's like I talk about, you know, having to, like, sometimes you have to go through really intense chapters to be able to get the knowledge, you know, and be able to learn the lessons to move forward, you know, and through the transition of a very important relationship or through the transition of finishing my master's degree, you know, when I'm somebody who people threw away back in the day, they're like, she'll never amount to anything, you know, to being also extremely obese, you know, and extremely depressed. You know, so those walks, those, you know, getting my body out, getting my mind right, you know, also has, you know, allowed me a kind of flexibility and openness that wasn't there before, you know, the ability to do things I wasn't able to before. Yeah. So, I mean, just, you know, yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Absolutely. I was thinking actually, as you were talking about listening to house and just kind of movement.
Yeah.
One of the first Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, I think it was maybe the first public meeting, and Susie Analog DJ'd. And that was the first time I had danced in, I realized, you know, at that moment, in like weeks. And it was just, I felt my whole body was elevated. I was like, I wanted to do things after that experience. So bringing dance and movement into your life regularly are so transformative. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. A ritual, just to say, I dance the sundown. I go to a spot, a Providence pedestrian bridge, and as the sun goes down, I'm out there. I don't care what anybody says, thinks, nothing. I dress like I want to dress, and I just give thanks. I just go in, honey. And if you get Vogue that day, be blessed. And if you get, you know, some salsa, whatever it is, just be blessed, you know. But I don't care. It's like you gotta, like, I gotta get free, and I allow myself that. All right, I'll stop talking. But yeah.
Yeah, those are great points. And yeah, Enongo, I remember that meeting too. I remember you gave an amazing presentation, and then it ended with, yeah, Susie Allen giving that great performance. I remember everyone on that call having a great time and like drinking and smoking and dancing. And it was just like, it felt like a party for, you know, for that little while. And that was kind of the beginning of things. And it was really also remember that being as an important, fun moment. I want to say that I've been consistently inspired by, yeah, just like our artistic and political community here in Rhode Island and in Providence. Like, just while all of this horrible, horrific things are happening, both in our state and across the country and the world, we've seen just like amazing organizing coming together on a bunch of things. I mean, the movement to like defund and abolish the police in Providence. There's like one city council hearing where people were phoning in for like 8 hours, maybe not that long, but like hours and hours and hours. It was several hours.
9 hours.
Yeah, nine. Okay, so yeah, it was. It's not like absolutely like incredible organizing feats happening around those campaigns with the primaries. All of these leftists and progressives got elected, you know, in towns from like South County all the way to like Pawtucket. So like amazing political organizing feats happening, and that people are getting up every day and saying like, I'm going to keep fighting to like make this a better world. And that's been consistently inspiring to see. And the artistic community too, that people, you know, again, people have been talking about this need to get away from the idea of like production. I think that's really important, but seeing people saying, doing a performance, doing a live stream of maybe even their older work, or just posting that they are getting up and like trying to write a song or write something is really inspiring, just to see people like keep trying and pushing through it in our community in Rhode Island is really inspiring.
Yeah, I build off of that. To me, the most inspiration I've gotten is from like our community in Providence, young people like Rhode Islanders, like stepping up, like Joey is saying. Like one of the most incredible, I feel like, I mean, being in Puerto Rico, I've had my share of seeing manifestations and protests, but like there was one, the largest one that happened here in Providence that was all youth led, and they actually were being followed by police through like all the way to like the neighborhood, and it lasted until 11 p.m. And I just had never seen such a elegant, peaceful way of like responding to that and managing themselves as a crowd. I was like, young people are coming in with a light that's like more powerful than all of our generations. And like just like also queer, trans, black and brown artists and black and brown people just rising up and saying, we're here, we exist, screw this whole system, like our joy is important. Like that's where I'm getting the energy, you know, like people with disabilities stepping up and being like, oh, now you're learning what it means to be accessible. Like we've been teaching and like doing this for years. And it's like, yeah, bless that. You know, I think that a lot of us are stepping up in a really beautiful way, and that's where I'm getting energy. I'm also getting energy. I do love music. I do love dancing. I do that in my own little corner here, being a corner troll at this point, and my computer plugging into the rest of the world. But yeah, my peers, you know, Joey, Nafis, you know, what you do in Enongo, what my friend Vatic Kumba's doing, like in Providence too. Everyone's just incredible in this city right now. There's like so much. And, you know, I do want to like plug this in because I heard it and it meant a lot to me. An artist I do like a lot is Janine Antoni, who actually graduated from RISD. And she did a talk, and like I was able to send a question, and she did answer my question. But the question was like, where do you feel the most tension in your creative process? Like, what is your biggest challenge? And I feel like a lot of people don't ask, you know, like artists, you know, we think about challenges, right? But what she answered was it actually made me feel really emotional, because what she answered was fear. And it was so grounding and honest, because it's like, yeah, I struggle with fear. We struggle with fear all the time. And just being honest about that, and the fact that no matter what you produce, you fear, you're super scared, or like waking up in the morning, like you're scared, but it's all right. Like we just have to keep moving forward. So the people, like Joey was saying, the people who wake up every day and put energy, I'm getting inspired by that, because damn, things are hard. And like the fact that we can put magic out in the world right now, that's deeply inspiring to me and necessary. So, yeah.
Thank you all so much. I have so much to to get my inspo from. I'm really, really excited, and I'm inspired by you all. I'm inspired by again. I think, like you all were saying, the act of trying. I mean, it's like the human story, but trying is really hard often, and it can be really hard, and especially when we're in isolation and when all of the metrics or tools that we use to evaluate our efforts with have evaporated or vanished or look completely different now. So I appreciate you all for being here and for trying, continuing to try as artists, as activists, as humans. We're running out on time, and I still have like 5 million questions left. So I'm going to bother all of you after this, but I think I want to close by thinking about a quote from Arundhati Roy, who says that talks about the pandemic as a portal, as a way through which we are reimagining everything about society. I think for me, something that's been really that I'm grateful for in this moment is the realizations that I've had about music as labor. And again, I want to plug the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers for helping me to think about myself as a worker, as a laborer, and being in relationship to other laborers, seeing the relationships between us and folks who work at the postal office, for example, like really bridging those connections between spaces that I don't think I had given as much thought to when I was in the day-to-day of like, let me book this show or send this magazine my latest song or whatever, you know. So I'm really grateful for that, and I just wanted to give you all the opportunity to talk about things that you would like to see on the other side, or maybe one thing that you would like to see on the other side or that you're working towards.
Yeah, it's hard to think about the other side sometimes, because then it's like, is there the other side? But I mean, it's creating the other side every day, certainly. And I mean, the example of the union is a great one for me, because I think it was probably an idea a lot of us had as musicians for a long time, is like, okay, how do we get like organized together to like push things? But the pandemic created such a crisis, and then also like we all weren't touring anymore at the same time, to where we're like, oh shit, like we've needed to do this, but now we can. And suddenly you had a place where, yeah, you had like thousands of musicians signing on to like demands for COVID relief that were the same as demands from workers in all sorts of like retail workers, food service workers, all this stuff, that it became clear that, yeah, like I've been struggling with not having healthcare as a musician for so long. Now all these other people are out of work, like we're in the same spot. Or if we don't get unemployment, if that doesn't get increased, we're all in the same spot together. So that kind of like class consciousness that's being built right now, I think is having is a super profound effect. And I think the music industry is already changing as this like consciousness is building up into it, to where we all just like, for example, intuitively like hate Spotify when the CEO of Spotify said some terrible things about like musicians just needing to like work harder and make stuff. Just everyone was like, no, like no, that's wrong. And I think even 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that kind of cohesion across people. So yeah, I'm hoping as artists we can, yeah, have really a new vision of what our artistic communities and the economies around this need to look like through this, and then also what's going to hopefully be on the other side.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was going to say, yeah, I think that there's been a lot of frustration with an artist like Kanye, who's saying, you know, I'm trying to free everyone from their contracts. And there are folks who are saying, we've been doing this work. We've been talking about this forever. Like, you know, throw some weight behind us, because we have really been talking about the label artist relationship for a long time. So folks are getting activated, and that's exciting, if frustrating at different times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just the time of the year that our patience is being stretched, but we are saying no to the bullshit, you know? So, and by that, I mean, you gonna pay me for my labor, right? Like, you know, certain things that have been coming up recently. I've been exercising no, you know, no is a whole sentence. Okay. So, and I mean that to say like, let me bring it back. I think often of Toni Morrison. I think about how she was talking about the importance, you know, is as you are coming up, bring somebody else, right? And I think about that no matter where you are currently. You know, I have, you know, in my practice, in my art practice right now, and having, for example, worked with this incredible print collective here in Providence, producing thousands. I mean, we went to work in the middle of COVID. I mean, these people are my heroes. You know what I'm saying? Like they showed up, you know, and we were creating this new landscape. We were creating a voice for people. We were creating, you know, like breathing points, you know, for people to just be like, you know, like be able to articulate some things. And maybe they're not making it themselves, but maybe they're like taking this and saying, this is where I'm at. But I think about that kind of, you know, those kinds of heroes. I think about, you know, like Morrison talking about bringing somebody else up. I think a lot about the kind of offers that I've had recently also about, you know, it's good for exposure, you know, and how I've had, you know, conversations with people about how exposure doesn't pay the bills. And I appreciate being a part of your consciousness right now. But, you know, in order to respect me and respect the people that are coming up behind, you know, to set a precedent and make that shift, I also have to be the one to say no. And mean it, you know, and mean it. I think a lot about philanthropy also. I think a lot about wealth. I think a lot about the way wealth has been, how this skin has been a wealth to this country. I mean, when we talk about also, you know, location, we talk about Brown University, honey, you know, I go to the slaves' graves often, you know, for guidance, you know, but the energies that have been used, the labor that has been used, the, you know, and when is it our own, you know, and when do we say no? When do we grow together? When do we, you know, manifest, and a lot for us to create wealth across all, you know, so that people can really experience, you know, levels of peace, levels of growth, levels that they, you know, had not previously. So in my practice, in my art practice, you know, always think about who's coming up at that time. Could be somebody that you tap for a show. It could be, you know, a favor that you do for somebody. It could be like buying somebody's art, you know, and eating rice and beans for a week, but you hook somebody up, you know what I mean? Like it just, it takes different, it manifests in different ways. So I would have to say like, you know, philanthropy, bringing other people on board. Yeah. You know, it takes a village. No one exists, you know, on an island, you know, we stronger. So, yeah.
And I love the no, like one no is so magical, and a chorus of no's, as we're hearing across the country and across the globe, it shifts the whole landscape. So it's really powerful.
Yeah, wow. Feeling full. I guess like the common thread, just like how it's an opportunity for us to shape what a creative economy really means for us, by us, on our own terms, like where we've always, in many occasions or often, are kept out of those decisions, out of those tables. They're usually defined by people who are trying to manage the wealth of wealthier people who have inherited power and privilege for years, and how that's no longer, like a lot of us are like, no, not anymore, you know? So when Nafis says like our relationships to foundations, that's something to really dig deep and explore. And also that, you know, for a long time, I used to think that like my ability or privileges as a person that could be in bridge to like change roles or code switch, that's the word, that was a power. Also later growing to understand how actually that can be harm, and it in many times is, and it's like you shouldn't be expected to do that. You should be able, if like a whole art sector is being created it's supposed to be meant to support artists and creative people and people to thrive. If it's not doing that, then we need to dump that whole thing. We need to dump that whole package, because it's like, if people still don't have healthcare, like if we still are like freelance workers that are not being recognized and don't have the same protections as like the cis heteropatriarchal system that we live in, if like queer people's families are not acknowledged, and we have to like, sometimes we can't even be in a hospital with our loved ones, like all this shit is like, dump it all. Like let's start from scratch. Like recognizing also that it's like, who are the first people who get, like, you know, affected by change too. So like holding that, because like there's a level of humility on holding that process or awareness of like, okay, let's look at the whole picture. So I just been thinking a lot about that. And like, yeah, the saying, no, like, why is it that you are expected as an artist to have to comply and serve all these institutions, or like, you know, even our own communities, like the boundaries of like, how do you show support, but also you need to take care of yourself. So I've been reflecting a lot on that and what it means to like, you know, hold yourself strong so that you can then step up to support everyone else. Because we do have to do a lot of internal work to unpack stuff. You know, a lot of the work, some of the work that I've also been doing so much, but like really taking the moment with other peers in my Latinx community to really observe and understand anti-Blackness, and like the fact that we showed up here and or are born from here but are always treated as foreigners, and also that we have proximity to whiteness that has like colonized our bodies and our minds. So who do you support? What do you build toward? I have a peer, Jamil Baez, who's an educator here in Providence, and she, my God, she said, like, if you don't build education that is meant to liberate us, then it's not education, it's not worth anything. So it's like, to that sense, like, what is your intention with the work that you do? That's something I reflect a lot. I feel like all of us are connected in this circle thinking a lot about that. If it's not intentional toward the liberation of our communities and families and loved ones, why should we invest in the first place? You know, because like this economy, this government is frail as hell because it's built on lies. So we get a chance to rethink, hopefully. I don't know. I'm like, done. Done. Drop the mic.
With the full
Drop the mic.
Like,
oh my goodness. Wow, y'all. I'm ready. I'm ready. I want this world. I want this world that we are talking about right here. I wanted the transparency, the support, the love, the bringing those on the margins to the center. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful for the art that you're working on and your activist work and your activism through your art, because we need it now more than ever. And we need to support our artists all across the board, whether that's Brown or you as an individual consumer. Figure out how to support the arts, because this administration and administrations past have been targeting artists for the longest. It's been a fight. So thank you, Nafis. Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Shey, for your incredible words. I can't wait to watch this back and show it to every single person I know. I'm just gonna be like just as lit, getting excited over here, hearing the words for the second, third, fourth, and fifth times. So before we go, I wanted to quickly lead us through kind of a breathing exercise, because we've reached the end of this festival, and we just had these powerful calls to action. So feel free, if you're watching, to join along. We're just gonna do a very, very quick breathing exercise. Okay, so just make sure you're feeling kind of limber. You can get some shoulder action in and put your hands to the side. You can stand up if you like. You don't have to. I'm staying in my comfy seat. And you're just gonna breathe in through your nose. Hold it in your chest. 1, 2, 3, and exhale through your mouth. We're gonna do that again. You're gonna breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3, exhale through your mouth. This time when we exhale, we're gonna make a shh sound. So you're gonna breathe in through your nose. 1, 2, 3. Out through your mouth, making a shh. And one more time. In through your nose. 1, 2, 3, and out through your mouth. I hope you're feeling at peace. Thank you for joining us for the Remaking the Real Festival. So grateful to be in your presence. And wherever you are, give it up for our presenters.